And a very warm welcome to this morning's webinar on the minimum wage check in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Duncan, I'm your host and presenter for this session, and I am joined by my colleague Calvin, who is standing by in the background ready to answer any questions. Let's now take a look at what we're going to cover in the webinar. So we'll start with a very brief overview of national minimum and living wage legislation, also confirming the current minimum wage rates as of the 1st of April. We're then going to go into some demos on how to set up the minimum wage check in Sage 50 Payroll. Once it's set up, we're going to process some periods with minimum wage employees, and we'll show you how you'll be prompted to automatically adjust rates if you're paying them below the minimum wage. We'll recap all of that process, and then we've got a bit of a knowledge check, an optional quiz that you can join in with a few questions on the contents of the webinar. We'll then run through some further support and give you that final opportunity to ask any questions. We'll do our best to answer as many as possible. We are expecting quite a few of you today, so if we don't get an answer to every question today, apologies in advance, but hopefully the useful links that we provide will be helpful as well. So let's get started with a little bit on national minimum or living wage legislation. So the national minimum wage is the minimum amount of pay per hour that employees are entitled to. So it's any employee above school leaving age, and it applies the rate that applies will depend on the age of the employee. Now the national living wage is higher than the national minimum wage, and it's the minimum amount an employee would get if they're 23 or over. So it's essentially the same thing, minimum wage and living wage. It's just that top rate has been given a slightly different name by the government. So let's take a look at the current rates, and these were applicable from the 1st of April of this year. So for employees aged 23 and over, they are entitled to the national living wage, which is £10.42 per hour. Employees aged 21 to 22 get £10.18 per hour. 18 to 20s at £7.49, and under 18s, so 16 and 17-year-olds, it's £5.28 per hour, which is the same amount for an apprentice who is either under 19 or 19 and over and in their first year of their apprenticeship. So when it comes to apprentices, if the apprenticeship lasts more than a year and the employee is 19 or over, after that first year, they would then get the minimum wage for their specific age. But if they're under 19, they can stay on the apprentice rate of £5.28. Now, for all of the rules around what earnings count towards minimum wage and who counts as an employee, we would recommend that you visit either the gov.uk or the ACAS website. We've linked to that from the current slide, and we've also got a useful links section which you'll find in the handout. So we're going to focus on the minimum wage check in Sage 50 Payroll, but we have tried to signpost you to some of the more in-depth information legislation-wise. So next up, we're going to have a look at setting up the minimum wage check. The best way to do this is to give you a demo. So let's just bring the slides down, and we'll just move that out of the way. First thing we're going to take a look at is the legislation settings. So even if you're not actually using the minimum wage check, this is a great way to remind yourself of what the current rates are for minimum and living wage. And to find this section, just go to the company tasks here in the bottom left corner, and then click onto legislation. And then within your legislation settings, if you select the minimum wage tab, you'll see the minimum and living wage effective from this tax year. And you can see the various rates that we went through on the slide. So top rate, the £10.42 is for employees 23 or older. We've then got the other rates for the younger employees, and we've got our apprenticeship rate down here at the bottom. And there is a tick box which can be used to opt out of minimum and living wage validation. So if you're going to be using our minimum wage check, you need to make sure that this box is not ticked. So we've got it clear in this example, but really handy if you need to quickly check what the minimum wage rates are, just come into your legislation settings and you will find it from here. Okay, so those settings are all built in. Let's now take a look at the setup process for the minimum wage check. Now, a few things just to make clear. This can only be used for hourly paid employees. So the number of hours worked do need to be recorded against a pay element in order for the minimum wage check to do the necessary calculations. So if you do currently pay a fixed salary, so a fixed amount per month or per week, you'll need to continue manually checking that the employees are earning the minimum wage based on their contracted hours. But if you do have staff that are hourly paid, you can set up your pay elements so that they're included in the minimum wage check. And then when you go on to process your payroll, you will then be alerted if anyone is being paid under their minimum wage. So let's start by looking at the pay element settings. So we're starting on the company tasks, and this time we will go into pay elements. Now for this demo, I've set up 4 different payments. A couple of them are hourly paid, and we've got 2 that are not hourly payments. So we'll start with our basic pay. If I click onto edit, I can show you the pay element settings. Now I have set this up as a variable payment, and this means that the minimum wage check can automatically adjust the rate if required. But if you had your hourly payment set up as a fixed pay element, you'll still be alerted if you're paying under the minimum wage, but you would then need to adjust the pay rates in the employee record. So we've got this one set up as variable. We've got some default values in, but these can be changed at employee level. And it's this section towards the bottom that will determine if a payment is included in the minimum wage check. So with this one being an hourly payment, we've ticked both of these boxes. So we're going to include the value of basic payments and also the number of hours in the minimum wage calculation. So this will be used to ascertain how many hours have been worked and how much has been earned for those hours. Now my next payment is for overtime. And if I show you the settings for this one, it's been set up as a factored payment. And the reason is that this overtime payment has what's known as a premium element. It's being paid at time and a half. And under minimum wage legislation, any premium element should be disregarded when calculating minimum wage. So the way that this one works is we would still include the value in the hours in the minimum wage calculation, but we've also indicated in this case that it includes a premium element. So the and a half bit of the payment will be ignored when doing the minimum wage calculation. So that setting is only available for a factored payment. This one's being based on our basic pay. So those are the 2 hourly payments. I do have an employee that receives a combination of basic and commission. So looking at the commission payment, we've set it as variable, and we are only including the value of this pay element in the minimum wage calculation because it doesn't relate to number of hours worked. It's just a payment of commission. And we've got similar settings for this last payment, which I've created so that we can add a line to the pay slip if we want to top up an employee's pay without really changing their current pay rates. So I've called this minimum or living wage top up. I've set the default hours as 1, but the rate is 0. And again, this is one where I've only included the value in the calculation. So if you're going to start using minimum wage check, you do need to make sure that your pay elements are flagged correctly. And just to share a quick tip before we move on to apply this check, there is a report you can run summarizing all of your pay element settings. So if you go into the main reports option here at the top, I've added it to my favorites. It's the payment types report, which is usually located in the company folder. So it's this one just here, payment types. And I'm going to preview it on screen. And we're just going to zoom in slightly. And you'll see for each of the payments, we've got the minimum wage settings. So my 2 hourly payments are flagged to be included in hours and rate. We also have that premium element for the overtime. And we have a couple of payments where it is just the rate, the value that's going to be included in the calculation. So this is a good way of checking at a glance if your pay elements are set up correctly. So that was step one, setting up your pay elements. The second step is to apply the minimum wage check to your employees. So two ways you can do this. You can do it for an individual employee by opening their record, clicking the Employment tab, coming down to Pay Elements here at the bottom, and then we have this checkbox to apply minimum or living wage check. So this can be switched on an individual basis like so. Or if you want to activate this check for a number of employees at the same time, you can also switch it on with global changes. So if I just select the remaining employees, they're all paid hourly. I can go into Tasks, Global Changes. You would then go to the Payments option in Global Changes, and from here, you can set the Apply Minimum / Living Wage flag. So I'm going to do that globally for the 4 selected employees, and the 4 employees are now included in the check. So one last report to show you at this point. So for any employee that you've included in the minimum wage check, they will appear on the minimum wage employees report. So you can find this again from the main reports area. It's another one I've added to my favorites, but this one is found within the employee folder. So it's minimum wage employees report, just here. And we'll give this one a quick preview. So I've got my 5 employees where we've included them in the minimum wage check. It lists the date of birth and age of each employee and the minimum wage band that they fall into. So most of mine are 23 or older. I've got a couple of 21-year-olds as well on the payroll. So that's a good way to check which of your employees have been included in the minimum wage check feature. So that's the setup done. I'm just going to quickly recap those steps for you. So step 1 was to review the pay element settings to ensure that the relevant pay elements are included in the minimum / living wage calculation. Remember, you can include value and hours for hourly payments, things like commission, top-up payments. You would only include the value. And if you do have factored payments with a premium element, do make sure you've ticked that 3rd box as well. And the second step was to apply the minimum or living wage check to your employees, either individually, as shown on the screenshot there, or using the global changes option as we showed you in the demo. So with that all set up, we are now ready to process our minimum wage employees. So I've engineered a few scenarios that will cause the minimum wage check to jump in and give us some alerts. So we're going to have a look at how that works exactly and what you can do to save any changes to the rates moving forward. So at this point, I'm going to return back to my payroll tasks. Now this is a weekly payroll, and I'm going to be paying my employees on Friday, which will be the 28th of July. I'm going to work through one employee at a time. So we'll start just by selecting our first employee. It's nice and straightforward, just a regular hourly paid employee. I'm going to jump into the enter payment screen, and you'll see currently we've got the number of hours worked this week, and we've got the employee's hourly rate, £10.42. This employee is over 23, and if I save their payments as they are currently entered, we're getting no warnings because we are paying them the national living wage. They're getting £10.42 per hour. Now, if for some reason the rate was below the minimum wage for their age, so if I drop it down to £10 an hour, if I then go to save the payments, you'll see that we're being prompted that they're being paid less than minimum wage. and it's asking us to choose a payment to adjust. Now, if we don't adjust the rate of pay, they'll be being paid less than the minimum wage. But if we choose to adjust it, which I will this time, if I click the adjust button, you can see it has now moved the rate up to what it should be, in this case, £10.42. So that's a really simple scenario with just one payment involved. I'll move on to our next employee. So this is an employee that also receives overtime payments. So let's just jump into the enter payment screen again. Again, they're over 23, so they're entitled to the national living wage. They've done 40 hours of basic and 10 hours of overtime at time and a half. And currently we've got the basic rate set at £10 an hour and overtime is at 15. Now, before I save these payments, I'm just going to bring up a calculator. And if we look at the total gross pay, so £550, and divide that by the total number of hours worked, which in this case is 50, it does look at first glance that the employee is being paid an average of £11 per hour, which is above the minimum wage rate. However, the overtime payment includes a premium element, so that premium amount is disregarded in the calculation. And if I click on Save/Next, you'll see that we're being prompted to adjust a payment. The only one that we can adjust from these two is the basic pay, because that's the only variable payment. And if I hit adjust, you can see it's moved up the basic rate to £10.42, and the overtime rate has also increased accordingly. So the employee is now being paid the minimum wage, excluding that overtime premium element. Okay, so for the next employee, I just want to show you what happens when they change bands. So if we take a quick look in the employee record here, on the 26th of July, this employee turned 21. So they'll be moving from the 18 to 20 band to the 21 and 22-year-old band. This will be effective from the first pay reference period on or after their birthday. So if we go into enter payments for the current period, it's just telling us that the NI category needs to be changed. So actually I can jump into the record and do that now. So they need to come off M and onto standard rate, because they're now over 20. Currently they're being paid £7.49 an hour. So that was the minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds. But when I click Save Next, again, I'm being prompted to adjust the basic. And if I click Adjust, that's going to put them up to £10.18, which is minimum wage for employees aged 21 to 22. Now, obviously, they're not going to get younger from this point. So what I'd probably want to do is jump into the employee record, go to the pay elements, which you find on the employment tab, and we can amend the default rate stored in the employee record to what it should be moving forward. Right, a couple of other employees just to show you on this one. Let's have a look at an employee who receives commission payments. So they're getting a basic hourly rate of £8.50 per hour, and this week they've earned £100 commission. So if I bring that calculator back up, total pay, £440. And number of hours worked is 40. So it's an average of £11 per hour. And as such, if I go to save these payments, there's no problems detected. This employee is being paid above minimum wage. Let's just adjust the commission though. Let's knock it down to say £50. So they're now getting a total of £390 for their 40 hours worked. Any maths fans will know that that is below £10 an hour. So £9.75 an hour. If we go to save these payments, they're being paid less than the minimum wage, and we are asked if we want to adjust either the basic pay or the commission. Now, for this one, I want to handle it slightly differently. So we would expect that the commission would cover their minimum wage usually, but in cases where it doesn't, I'm just going to cancel out of this screen. I want to add an additional line to their payslip. So I'm going to add a payment that I've already set up for minimum wage top up. We've set the hours value to 1, but the default rate is nothing. And if we are to save the payments now, it is going to give us the option of adjusting that minimum living wage top up. So I'll hit adjust. I need another £26.80 to meet the requirements of minimum wage. And just to verify that with the calculator, £416.80 divided by the 40 hours worked is your £10.42 minimum wage for employees aged 23 and above. Last one, just to show you in this demo, is for an apprentice. So if you are employing apprentices on approved apprenticeship scheme, they can be paid the apprenticeship rate for minimum wage in the if they're under 19, or in their first year if they're aged 19 or over. So this particular employee is a 21-year-old. And if I go onto the employment tab and click on the apprentice option, so this is where you record apprenticeship details. You can see they started their apprenticeship on the 1st of August last year, so it's coming up to a year, not quite a year on the current pay date. So the minimum wage they're entitled to is the apprentice rate. So we'll jump into enter payments. Done the 40 hours. This is the apprentice rate, £5.28, and we can happily save that payment without being prompted to make any adjustments. So anything that has been automatically adjusted is adjusted for this pay run only. And you will find once you've updated records and you move on to your next pay date, it will revert back to the original rates that were entered in the enter payment screen. So what you may need to do is update the default rates within the employee records and update the rate shown in enter payments to stop that prompt coming up each time. But I'm just going to go ahead and update the records for this period. And then you would send your FPS in the usual way. And just moving forward 1 week, just to show you what's going to happen this time. Once that pay date is saved, we'll go back into enter payments. Yeah, it's just about caught up. And you can actually see for this first employee, because we changed the rate down to £10, it's actually gone back to what that rate was. So if I click save next, it's going to prompt me. It's below the minimum wage. So what I will do is I'll just go back. We'll set this to £10.42. And then similarly for this next employee. So when there has been an increase in rate identified, you should update the default values, update the values in enter payments, and then you won't be continuously reminded to adjust your payments. So again, this one went up to £10.18. Employee on commission, let's say they received a little bit more commission this time. Still not quite enough for minimum wage, so we'll give them that top up to give an extra £1.80. And this is the one I wanted to show you. It's the apprentice over 19, just gone into the second year of the apprenticeship. So we do need to make an increase to their rate at this point. It's going to go up to the 21 to 22-year-old rate of £10.18. And that's because the first year of apprenticeship has now been completed. So that is processing minimum wage employees, and a quick recap of how that all works. You get a message that appears if employees are being paid below their minimum wage. And if you're using variable payments, you will be asked if you want to select a payment to adjust. If it was a fixed payment, it will just alert you that they're being paid less than the minimum wage. It's down to you then to amend the rates in the employee record. And to set your default rates, make sure you do that within the employee record, within the enter payment screen, and also a good idea to update them in your pay element settings. So any new staff that you take on are starting off with the current minimum wage rates. So we have got a quick quiz coming up, a bit of a knowledge check on what you've seen so far, but I did want to mention these useful links, particularly if you do have questions around the legislation side of things. So we've got some knowledge-based articles which will guide you through setting up the minimum wage check and using it, so everything that I've covered in the demo. The gov.uk links give a good overview of national minimum wage on the first link, and then you've got some really detailed guidance on the second link. And ACAS is also a useful link for both yourselves and your employees to learn more about minimum wage entitlement. So all of those links, of course, are in your handout. So we're going to finish with a quick quiz. Now this is entirely optional. You don't have to join in. We're going to be using the polling feature where you can vote for an answer that you think is correct, and we will share the overall percentages after each question. Do use this time as well to review any of the questions that have been submitted and submit your own questions that you'd like us to answer during the session. But we've got 4 questions in this quiz for you. First of which will appear on your screen just now. So question 1, can you tell me what is the current national living wage? So I've given you 4 options. Is it £9 per hour? Is it £9.50 an hour? Is it £10.25 per hour? Or is it £10.42? So national living wage. This rate came into effect on the 1st of April of this year. But was it £9, £9.50, £10.25, or was it £10.42? So for these questions, we'll give you about a minute to vote or to submit a response. It's all looking pretty positive so far. Got a large percentage of you picking the correct answer. And then after that minute, we will close down the poll and I will then share the result. So well done, 99%. It's showing at this end for answering £10.42. That is indeed the current national living wage. So on to question 2. So this one is, at what age does an employee get the national living wage? So are they entitled to that when they turn 22? Is it for employees aged 23? Do they need to be 24? Or does it apply to those aged 25 and above? So currently, at what age does an employee get national living wage? This is due to change from April 2024. And it did change fairly recently, changed from one age to another. So do they get national living wage at 22, 23, 24, or 25 years old? Okay, so we've had about a minute for that question. I'm going to close the poll and let's see who was right. So we have 81% of you selected the correct answer. National living wage is payable at age 23 or above. Used to be 25 and above. And it is planned to reduce to 21 years old and above with effect from April 2024. So you might have noticed the rate for 21 and 22-year-olds was £10.18 per hour. It's quite close to the national living wage. And that was done intentionally because the plan is to bring all of the 21-year-olds and above into national living wage from next April. So it hasn't been officially approved yet, but that is the government's intention. So well done, 81% saying 23 years old. Okay, next question for you. Where can you find the current minimum wage rates in Sage 50 Payroll? So we had a look at this right at the start of the webinar. So can you find the current minimum wage rates within the Enter Payment screen? Would you find them within the Employee Record and the Pay Elements section? Are the minimum wage rates found within the Pay Element settings from the company tasks? Or can you find the minimum wage within the Legislation tab in the company settings? So if you wanted to have a quick check, remind yourself what the minimum wage rates are, where would you go? Would you go to Enter Payments, Employee Record, the Company Pay Element settings, or is it Company and Legislation? Okay, so closing that one now. And again, sharing the results. Very well done, 96% of you got that right. You can find all of the minimum wage rates within Company and then Legislation. It's found on the Minimum Wage tab. So Company Pay Elements is where you can set default rates. So you may have entered a minimum wage rate there, but to check them all for all of the age bands, it's Company and Legislation. Okay, so we'll do one more. Last question for you. So in Sage 50 Payroll, what type of payment can be automatically adjusted by the minimum wage check? So there's only one type of payment that can be automatically adjusted. Is that a variable payment? Is it a fixed payment? Is it a global payment or a factored payment? So when you see that message saying that the employee is being paid below minimum wage, there's only one type of payment that will come up in the list. So is that variable, fixed, global, or factor? So votes are starting to roll in. We'll give you another 10 seconds. Okay, so let's just close that down and share the results. So for this one, so 79% of you got that one right. Variable payments could be automatically adjusted. If it's fixed or global, you would still get the prompt to tell you that minimum wage is not being paid, but there wouldn't be an adjust option because the only type of payments where you can change a rate within the Enter Payment screen are variable payments. So well done, 79% of you who got that question correct. So that was it for the quiz. Our quick knowledge check. How did you do on that one? We do have a few minutes left, about 10 minutes left in the webinar session, so we will stick around to try and answer any further questions in the chat. While that's happening, I'll quickly run through some of the further support available. So you may have heard me mention some of the knowledge base articles that we've linked to, and all of this and more can be found on our help center online at sage.co.uk/help, or by clicking any of the help options within Sage 50 Payroll. So from the Help Center, there's a search bar at the top where you can search for knowledge base articles. You can read support guides on particular topics. At the top of the Help Center page, you'll see a link to webinars. So this is also where you can see what other webinars are coming up, get yourself registered, and also catch up on our recent recordings. There are some YouTube videos available in the Help Center, and if you do ever need to get in touch with our support team, you'll find all of their contact details here as well. So one-stop shop for all things payroll, sage.co.uk/help. Another great resource is available at sageu.com. It's Sage University. It's included as a Sage member, and you get access to our e-learning courses, online certification, and bite-sized learning. If you've never used it before, you'll need to create a profile. It's all completely free to set up. And then once you've done that, find yourself towards the Sage 50 payroll training, and you can get stuck in and brush up on your payroll knowledge. So that's all of that at sageu.com. So that's it for the further support, and we are going to focus on answering questions for the rest of the webinar. So if you've got any final questions you'd like to ask, do submit them now via the Q&A. If you'd like a copy of our presentation, you can download either of the handouts from the documents icon. We will be sending you a follow-up email in about an hour's time, which will contain a link to the recording of the session if you want to catch up, or if you've got any colleagues you want to share that with. And when you exit the webinar, if you click the exit button, it should pop up with a webinar survey. So any feedback that you have on this webinar, anything we can do to improve it, what you liked, what you didn't like, do let us know in the survey. It really does help us to improve these things moving forward, and we do read all of your comments. So I'm going to go on mute for a few minutes as we go through the questions. I will come back either when we've completed all the questions or we've run out of time. So I will speak to you shortly. Okay, so we have reached our scheduled end time there, and I think we've managed to send through an answer to most of the questions. So thanks so much for sending those through. All that really remains at this point is to thank you all for joining us at the webinar today. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment to complete the short exit survey as you leave, we'd very much appreciate that. Do look out for your follow-up email arriving later today with the link to register for future webinars and to watch our recordings. So with that said, on behalf of myself and Calvin, thanks once again for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your week, and maybe we'll see you on some of our other webinars soon. Goodbye for now.